My name is Guillermo, and my topic is the harm principle. This principle says that the only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others. In other words, it means that the behavior can be legitimately prohibited if it causes or has a high risk of causing serious harm to other people. As a common example of this principle, it would be the fact of driving under the effects of alcohol. In this situation, one person can clearly cause harm to others. But what happens when we apply this principle to the capital punishment? It is commonly believed that execution of one criminal would remove the possibility that this criminal can carry out more crimes in the future, and as a consequence of this, avoiding harming to the society. But at this point, some questions appear. Is this justice or legalized murder? Does it prevent crime or lessen respect for the law? But the most important question is, does the existence of capital punishment within a society harm the basic principles of this society? Because if it harms these basic principles, then it harms to the entire society. And for me, the answer to this question is yes, completely. Next, I'm going to state all the reasons which support this approach. First one, as my friend Natalia said, the death penalty could be considered as unconstitutional. Taking as reference the American society, I like to make reference to the one document that is the core of this society as nation, and is the Constitution of the United States. The 8th Amendment of this Constitution says, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. And nowadays, I firmly believe that death is a cruel and unusual punishment. Second one, death penalty undervalues the human life. What is the value of human life? By legalizing execution, society puts itself on the same low level as those it executes, and may even increase violence in society by making it more acceptable, or in other words, by reducing the value of human life. As the Senator Harold Hughes says, if a community wants to stop killing, it has best begin by stop killing on its own part. Respect for life is best taught by the observance of life. Third, death penalty rejects the right to life. Everyone has an inalienable human right to life, even those who commit murder. Sentencing a person to death and executing them violates that right. With this, death penalty also rejects the Declaration of Independence of the United States. In this line of thinking, we can say that death penalty is the ultimate denial of human rights by the state in the name of justice. It violates the Articles number 3 and number 5 proclaimed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights belonging to the United Nations. Fourth, the death penalty does not deter crime. Scientific studies have consistently failed to find convincing evidence that the death penalty deters crime more effectively than other punishments. As an example, in 1993, the average of murder rate in the states with death penalty was 56% higher than in the states without it. Fifth, the execution of death penalty is unfairly applied. The death penalty is discriminatory and is often used disproportionately against the poor, minorities, and members of racial, ethnic, and religious communities. Sixth, death penalty negates the principle of rehabilitation of offenders. It is also impossible to determine whether those executed would actually have repeated these crimes of which they were convicted. Execution entails taking the life of prisoners to prevent hypothetical future crimes, many of which would never have been committed anyway. And the last one, execution of innocent people. Unlike imprisonment, the death penalty entails the risk of judicial errors which can never be corrected. There will always be a risk that some prisoners who were innocent will be executed. As an example, the Stanford University Law Review says that between 19th and 1985, at least 23 people later found to be completely innocent were executed in the United States. So once explained all these arguments, I can conclude that for me and for my group, the capital punishment clearly harms the basic principles of our society instead of helping us to avoid this harm.
I'm Ryan Nesbitt, and I'm just going to read the actual quote from one of the quotes from John Stuart Mill's about the harm principle. The only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others. His own good, either physical or moral, is not a sufficient warrant. Over himself, over his own body and mind, the individual is sovereign. Now, when you look at it towards capital punishment, it really comes to the point where capital punishment is to prevent harm to others. Not only just to people that you can continue to kill in prison, like Bruno said, that is one of the only ways to stop people who have life sentences. They can still continue to kill people. There's nothing to stop them. But also economically. We'll get into it later, but the fact that it is harming us as a nation by the fact that we're keeping these people alive. It's awful to say, I understand that, but the cost of keeping them alive over, I believe, like a 40-year run is so much worse than actually just committing the capital punishment and actually sentencing them to death. And I understand that has huge moral implications, but that's not what the harm principle is about. Moral values vary across different cultures and over different times. At one point it was okay to actually capitally punish somebody, and now I understand that it's not. And that's depending on the culture. In our culture, it is okay to do that. The disagreement in these behaviors is criminalized, is reflected on the laws concerning these behaviors, often vary over time, place, and the given time. In other words, criminal law is to some extent how the government determines it. Our government determines it. Capital punishment, as Gino went through it, is the course of action that we take. That is our course of action. You look at it in saying, if we didn't have the harm principle, that's like getting rid of paternalistic legislation. That's seatbelt laws, motorcycle helmet laws. It's things like not having lifeguards at pools. These are harm principles. These are principles that actually come into play. The use of prohibiting drugs that aren't approved by the FDA. Not sending kids to school. I mean, the idea behind the harm principle, it doesn't apply to children, and it doesn't apply to certain individuals that can't control themselves. But the harm principle in itself is to keep the society, the social contract, safe. And that is what capital punishment does.